The Friday evening rush at Giovanni's restaurant was in full swing. The smell of garlic bread and marinara sauce filled the air as dozens of conversations blended into a comfortable hum. Crystal glasses clinked together in toasts while servers weaved between tables carrying steaming plates of pasta and pizza. Maya Rodriguez pushed through the kitchen doors with practiced ease, balancing 3 dinner plates on her left arm. The chicken parmesan for the couple at table 12, extra cheese just like they asked. The seafood linguine for the businessman who barely looked up from his phone when she approached. The eggplant rollatini for the elderly gentleman celebrating his 70th birthday with his daughter. She'd been doing this for 3 years now, and her body knew the routine without thinking. Her feet followed the same paths between tables. Her hands moved automatically, setting plates down at just the right angle, refilling water glasses before they were empty, clearing finished courses with smooth efficiency. Table 12 needed their entrees. Table 7 wanted more bread. Table 4 had a question about the wine list that she'd already answered twice. She was 28 years old and completely invisible. Not in a bad way, really. Being invisible as a server was actually useful. It was like being a ghost who could walk through walls and hear secrets. People talked freely around her, celebrated their birthdays and anniversaries, had arguments and made up, all while she refilled water glasses and cleared plates. She was part of the scenery, like the framed photos of the Italian countryside on the walls or the checkered tablecloths. Maya didn't mind it most days. The tips were decent, especially on Fridays. She got along with the other servers and the kitchen staff. Her manager, Tony, was demanding but fair. It was honest work, and right now honest work was exactly what she needed. The restaurant was busier than usual tonight. Some local business was having a celebration dinner in the private dining area. 40 people, all dressed in suits and cocktail dresses, congratulating each other on something corporate that Maya didn't fully understand. Tony had hired a pianist for the evening to make things feel more upscale and sophisticated. The piano sat in the corner of the main dining room, a beautiful black grand piano that the owner had bought at an auction 5 years ago. Usually it just sat there looking elegant. A few times a year for special events someone would come play it. Tonight was supposed to be one of those nights. Maya was clearing table 18 when she heard Tony swearing under his breath in the hallway. She glanced over and saw him with his phone pressed to his ear, his face turning red. Tony was usually calm under pressure. In 3 years she'd seen him handle kitchen fires, food critic visits, and a proposal gone wrong when the ring rolled under a table. But right now he looked genuinely panicked. "What do you mean you can't make it?" Tony said, trying to keep his voice down but failing. His free hand gestured wildly in the air. "You confirmed yesterday. I called you this morning. We have 40 people here expecting live music." Maya couldn't hear the response, but she watched Tony close his eyes and take a deep breath through his nose. "Food poisoning. Right. Yes, I understand. Feel better?" He hung up and stood there for a moment looking at the silent piano like it had personally betrayed him. Maya walked past with her tray of dirty dishes. "Pianist canceled?" "Last minute," Tony muttered. "These corporate people specifically requested live piano music. It's in their contract. I've got nothing." "Maybe play some classical music through the speakers?" Maya suggested. "Not the same. They wanted the ambiance, the real thing. They're paying extra for this." Tony ran his hand through his thinning hair. "It's going to look unprofessional." Maya nodded sympathetically and headed to the kitchen. It wasn't her problem to solve. She had 6 tables to manage and a growing list of orders to keep straight in her head. But as the evening went on, she couldn't help noticing the piano. It sat there in its corner, the lid open, the keys gleaming under the soft lighting. A few of the corporate guests had already walked over to look at it, clearly expecting something that wasn't going to happen. She heard one woman in a red dress say to her companion, "I thought they said there would be live music?" The man shrugged. "Maybe later." Maya delivered their desserts and moved on to the next table. She was wiping down table 9 when she heard Tony explaining to one of the corporate guests that unfortunately, the pianist had taken ill. The guest, a stern-looking man in an expensive suit, looked disappointed. "That's really too bad," he said. "Live piano really makes these events special. Creates the right atmosphere, you know." Tony apologized again and offered them a discount on the wine. The man accepted but still looked unhappy as he walked back to his group. The evening continued. Maya's feet ached in her non-slip shoes. Her lower back had that familiar tightness that came from hours of bending and reaching. She dropped off checks at 3 tables and was calculating her tips in her head when she took her 15-minute break. She grabbed a glass of water and stood in the back hallway, rolling her shoulders and stretching her neck. From where she stood, she could see straight through to the dining room, and her eyes landed on the piano again. She'd walked past that piano hundreds of times over 3 years. She dusted it during slow shifts, running her cloth carefully over its curves. She'd set drinks on nearby tables while carefully making sure nothing would spill on its glossy surface. She'd watched guests take photos next to it, treating it like a prop, a pretty piece of furniture. But she'd never touched the keys. Not once, not in 3 years. Not in 9 years if she was being completely honest with herself. The truth was, she'd been avoiding it. Every shift, she'd choose paths through the dining room that kept her away from that corner. She'd volunteer to work the patio section or handle takeout orders, anything to not have to walk past it too many times. Because every time she did, something inside her chest tightened, a mix of longing and grief so intense it almost took her breath away. Old Mrs. Patterson, one of the regulars, was being seated at her usual table near the window. She came every Friday, always ordered the chicken piccata, always left exactly 20%. She was in her 80s now, a retired music teacher with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She'd told Maya once that she'd taught piano for 45 years. Maya walked back into the dining room and started her next round of tables. She took orders, made recommendations, laughed at jokes she'd heard 100 times before, but something felt different tonight. There was an itch in her fingers she couldn't quite explain. During a brief lull between courses, she found herself standing near the piano again. Her hand reached out, almost without permission, and her fingers brushed lightly across the smooth wooden frame. The touch sent a jolt through her chest, something between pain and longing. Beautiful instrument, isn't it? Mrs. Patterson's voice made Maya jump. The older woman had gotten up from her table and stood beside her. Such a shame no one's playing it tonight. Yeah, Maya said softly. The pianist got sick. Do you play? Mrs. Patterson asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. Maya opened her mouth to say no, to give the answer she'd been giving for years now. But something stopped her. She looked at the keys, perfectly aligned, waiting. She thought about the disappointed faces of the corporate guests. She thought about Tony's stress. She thought about things she hadn't let herself think about in a very long time. I used to, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Patterson smiled. I thought so. You have the hands of a pianist. Maya looked down at her hands, currently holding an empty tray, the nails short and practical, a small burn scar on her thumb from a too-hot plate last month. She'd spent years trying to forget what these hands used to do, what they used to create. The kitchen doors swung open and another server called her name. Back to work, back to reality, back to being invisible. But as she walked away, Maya could feel the piano behind her, its presence impossible to ignore. And for the first time in 9 years, she wondered what would happen if she stopped running from the one thing that used to define her entire existence. The evening was far from over, and neither was Maya's story. The rest of Maya's shift moved in slow motion. Every time she passed the piano, her eyes would drift toward it, pulled by some invisible force she couldn't control. The corporate party in the private dining room was getting louder, their laughter echoing through the restaurant. They'd finished their main courses and were well into their 3rd round of drinks. She delivered tiramisu to table 5 and noticed the woman in the red dress from earlier walking toward the piano. The woman ran her hand along its edge, then turned to her companion with a disappointed shake of her head. Maya felt a strange protectiveness wash over her. That piano deserved better than to sit silent all night like a broken promise. Tony was stress-eating breadsticks in the kitchen when Maya went to grab another order. He looked miserable. The corporate client had already complained twice about the missing entertainment, and Maya could tell her manager was worried about the restaurant's reputation. Maybe someone else knows how to play, offered Carlos, one of the line cooks, trying to be helpful. Tony shook his head. I already asked everyone. Danny can play chopsticks. That's it. The other servers laughed, but Maya stayed quiet. Her heart was pounding in her chest, doing something weird and uncomfortable. Her hands felt sweaty. There was a voice in her head, small but persistent, telling her she could fix this. She could walk out there, sit down and play something. Anything. But that voice terrified her more than anything had in years. She grabbed the plates for table 14 and pushed back through the doors. 20 more minutes until her break. She could make it 20 more minutes without doing something crazy. Except the evening had other plans. As Maya was refilling water glasses in the main dining room, she heard a crash from the private party area. One of the corporate guests had knocked over a wine glass, and suddenly Tony was rushing over with towels, apologizing, making sure nothing had stained anyone's expensive suit. In the chaos, the stern-looking man from earlier, the one who'd complained about the music, stepped into the main dining room. He walked straight to the piano. Maya watched as he lifted the lid, pressed a few keys experimentally, and winced at the discordant sounds. He clearly had no idea what he was doing, but he was trying anyway. A few of his colleagues followed him out, drinks in hand, watching with amused expressions. "Come on, Richard, show us what you've got," one of them called out. Richard laughed, embarrassed. "I took lessons when I was 8. That was 35 years ago." He attempted something that might have been the beginning of a children's song, but his fingers hit wrong notes, and the rhythm was all over the place. His friends cheered anyway, finding the whole thing hilarious. But Maya could see other guests in the restaurant starting to look annoyed. The elderly couple at table 9 exchanged glances. Mrs. Patterson looked pained. This was worse than silence. This was like watching someone destroy something beautiful without even knowing it. Tony appeared at Maya's elbow, his voice low and urgent. "Can you politely ask them to stop? Tell them the piano needs tuning or something." But before Maya could move, Richard hit a particularly bad chord and gave up, laughing and holding up his hands in surrender. All right, I'm no Beethoven. Anyone else want to try?" His colleagues shook their heads, still laughing, and started to head back to their private room. Crisis averted, Maya thought. The piano would stay silent, and she could finish her shift and go home and forget this whole uncomfortable evening. Then Mrs. Patterson stood up. The elderly woman walked slowly toward the piano, her movements careful and deliberate. She'd left her cane at the table, and Maya instinctively moved closer in case she needed help. But Mrs. Patterson seemed steady enough as she approached the instrument. "I taught piano for 45 years, she said to no one in particular, her voice soft but clear. "I always hate to see one go unplayed." Richard and his friends paused, intrigued. Other diners turned to watch. Even the kitchen staff peeked through the door window. Mrs. Patterson sat down on the bench with a soft sigh, adjusted her position, and placed her hands on the keys. What came out was beautiful. Simple but beautiful. She played something classical that Maya recognized immediately, something by Mozart. Her fingers weren't as fast as they probably once were, and she stumbled over a few notes, but the music was there. Real music, the kind that made the air in the room feel different. The restaurant went completely quiet except for the piano. Even the corporate guests who'd been loud all evening stopped talking and listened. Mrs. Patterson played for maybe 2 minutes, then stopped, her hands trembling slightly as she lifted them from the keys. "That's all these old hands can manage anymore," she said with a gentle smile, "but it's nice to play again." The entire restaurant erupted in applause. Richard and his colleagues clapped the loudest, clearly moved by the unexpected performance. Mrs. Patterson stood carefully, nodding her thanks, and began walking back to her table. She passed right by Maya and stopped. Their eyes met, and in that moment Maya saw something in the older woman's expression. Understanding, recognition, challenge. "Your turn, dear," Mrs. Patterson said quietly, just for Maya to hear. Maya's mouth went dry. "I can't. You can. I see it in your eyes. You've been staring at that piano all night like it's calling your name." Mrs. Patterson's voice was kind but firm. "Sometimes the things we run from are the things we need most. I haven't played in years. I wouldn't even know where to start. Your hands know. They always remember even when we try to forget." Mrs. Patterson patted Maya's arm gently. "The question isn't whether you can play, sweetheart. It's whether you're brave enough to try." Then she walked back to her table, leaving Maya standing there in the middle of the restaurant with her heart hammering against her ribs. Tony appeared beside her again. "That was amazing. At least we got something, right?" The corporate guys seemed happy now, but they weren't heading back to their private room. They were lingering, talking excitedly, the mood lifted by Mrs. Patterson's impromptu performance. Richard called out to Tony, "Hey, any chance we could get more of that?" That was exactly the kind of ambiance we wanted. Tony spread his hands helplessly. "I wish I could help. Our pianist called in sick and I don't have anyone else." Maya felt dozens of eyes in the room. She felt the weight of the silent piano, She felt 9 years of running, of hiding, of pretending to be someone she wasn't. She felt her father's face in her memory, the way he used to smile when she played, before the sickness took those smiles away. Her feet started moving before her brain could stop them. She walked past table 7, past table 12, past the wine rack and the framed photos of Italy. She walked straight to the piano like she was walking to her own execution. Her hands were shaking. Her legs felt weak. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to make an excuse, to run. Instead, she sat down on the bench. The smooth wood felt foreign and familiar all at once. She looked at the keys, 88 of them, black and white, waiting. She could feel everyone watching her. Tony looked confused. The corporate guests looked curious. Mrs. Patterson looked proud. Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her fingers found the keys and muscle memory kicked in like she'd never stopped playing, like the last 9 years had never happened. Like she was 19 again and the world still made sense. She began to play. The first notes came out tentative, unsure. But then something inside her unlocked and suddenly the music poured out of her like water from a broken dam. Her fingers flew across the keys, finding notes and chords she'd thought she'd forgotten. She played something complex, something beautiful, something that came from a place deep in her soul where she'd buried all her grief and regret and broken dreams. She wasn't playing background music. She wasn't playing simple restaurant ambiance. She was playing like her life depended on it, and in some ways maybe it did. The restaurant had disappeared. The tables, the guests, the clinking glasses and murmured conversations. All of it faded away until there was nothing but Maya and the piano and the music flowing through her fingers like electricity. She played Rachmaninoff. Prelude in C-sharp minor, one of the most technically difficult pieces in the classical repertoire, full of thundering chords and delicate runs that required absolute precision. Her hands moved across the keys with a speed and confidence that seemed impossible for someone who supposedly hadn't played in years. The music started dark and brooding, each note heavy with emotion. Her fingers crashed down on the bass notes, making the whole piano vibrate. Then the melody shifted, became lighter, more hopeful, before plunging back into darkness. It was passionate and furious and heartbreaking all at once. Around her, the entire restaurant had frozen. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. The kitchen doors stopped swinging as servers stood transfixed, watching this woman they'd worked alongside for 3 years transform into someone completely different. Tony stood with his mouth open, a wine bottle forgotten in his hand. The corporate guests had moved closer, drawn by the music like moths to a flame. Richard pulled out his phone, not to check messages but to record. Others did the same. Even the kitchen staff had come out, Carlos and the other cooks wiping their hands on their aprons, staring in disbelief. Mrs. Patterson sat at her table with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, her hands clasped together like she was witnessing something sacred. Maya's eyes were closed. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere 9 years ago when music was her entire world, when she'd wake up at 5 in the morning to practice before school, when she'd spend 8 hours at the conservatory on Saturdays, her fingers moving over the keys until they ached, when her parents would sit in the audience at competitions, her mother clutching her father's hand, both of them beaming with pride, when everything still made sense. The piece built to its climactic finale, Maya's hands flying over the keys in a blur of motion, hitting every note perfectly despite the complexity, despite the years away. The final chord rang out through the restaurant, powerful and complete, and then there was silence. Total, absolute silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The last note hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. Then the applause started. It began with Richard clapping loudly, then his colleagues joined in, and suddenly the entire restaurant was on its feet. The corporate party, the regular diners, the elderly couple from table 9, everyone was standing and clapping. Some were cheering. Mrs. Patterson was nodding through her tears, mouthing, "I knew it, I knew it." Maya opened her eyes, and the reality of what she'd just done crashed into her like a wave. Her hands were still on the keys, trembling now. Her face felt hot. She looked around at all the people staring at her, at their amazed expressions, at the phones pointed in her direction, and panic started to set in. She stood up quickly, almost knocking over the bench. "I should get back to work," she mumbled, but her voice was drowned out by the continued applause. Tony reached her first. Maya, what was that? Where did you learn to play like that? I used to take lessons, she said weakly, knowing how ridiculous that sounded. You didn't play Rachmaninoff like that from taking lessons at the local music store. Richard pushed through the small crowd that had formed. His stern business face was gone, replaced by genuine wonder. That was extraordinary. Are you a professional pianist? Do you perform? No, I work here. I'm a server. Not just anything, Mrs. Patterson said, joining them. She took Maya's hands in her own, examining them like precious artifacts. These are the hands of a concert pianist. I taught for 45 years, dear. I know real talent when I see it. More people crowded around asking questions. Where had she trained? What else could she play? Why was she working as a waitress? Maya felt overwhelmed, trapped, unable to breathe. This was exactly what she'd been avoiding for 9 years. This attention, these questions, this life she'd left behind. Everyone, please, let's give her some space, Tony said, finally finding his manager voice. Maya, take your break. Go get some air. She didn't need to be told twice. Maya practically ran to the back hallway, through the kitchen where the staff watched her pass with new eyes, and out the rear exit into the alley behind the restaurant. The cool night air hit her face and she leaned against the brick wall trying to steady her breathing. What had she done? What had she been thinking? She'd broken her own rule, the one that had kept her safe for years. Don't play. Don't perform. Don't let anyone see that part of you because it only leads to pain. The back door opened and Tony stepped out. He lit a cigarette, something Maya had only seen him do a handful of times in 3 years, usually after particularly stressful shifts. You going to tell me what's going on? He asked, not unkindly. Maya stared at the dumpster across the alley. There's nothing to tell. Maya, I just watched you play piano like you were born to do it. Like it was as natural as breathing. That's not nothing. He took a drag from his cigarette. In 3 years, you never mentioned you could play. Not once. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, because the secret felt too heavy to carry alone anymore, she started talking. I was a prodigy, she said, the words feeling strange in her mouth. That's what they called me. Started piano when I was 4. By the time I was 8, I was winning regional competitions. At 12, I played with the Youth Symphony. At 16, I got a full scholarship to the Manhattan Conservatory. Tony whistled low. That's impressive. My parents sacrificed everything for it. My mom worked 2 jobs. My dad drove for a delivery company, put in 60-hour weeks. They're immigrants from Taiwan. Came here with nothing. They saw my talent as their American dream coming true. Maya's voice cracked. I was supposed to be their success story. What happened? My sophomore year at the conservatory, my dad started forgetting things. Little stuff at first. Where he put his keys. What day it was. We thought it was just stress. She wiped at her eyes roughly. Then he got lost driving home from work one day. A route he'd driven 1,000 times. That's when we knew something was really wrong. Tony didn't say anything, just listened. Early onset Alzheimer's, he was only 48. Maya laughed, but it came out bitter. The doctors said it would progress fast. They were right. Within a year, he couldn't work anymore. The medical bills started piling up. My mom couldn't handle 2 jobs and taking care of him alone. So you left school, Tony said quietly. I dropped out the beginning of my junior year. Got a job, then another job, then this job. Helped pay for his care. For the medications that barely helped. For the memory care facility when he got too bad for us to handle at home. She looked at her hands. The same hands that had just played Rachmaninoff perfectly. I told myself it was temporary. That I'd go back eventually. That was 9 years ago. And you just stopped playing completely? Every time I sat at a piano, all I could think about was what I'd given up. What I was supposed to be. It hurt too much. Maya shook her head. It was easier to just pretend that part of me didn't exist anymore. They stood in silence for a while, the sounds of the city around them. Traffic in the distance, someone laughing down the street, the hum of the restaurant's exhaust fan. Your dad, Tony asked carefully. Is he still? He's still alive. Still in the facility. Most days he doesn't remember who I am. Sometimes he doesn't even remember who he is. Maya's voice was barely a whisper. But I visit every week anyway. Tony finished his cigarette and crushed it under his shoe. You know what I think? I think your dad would hate knowing you gave up something you loved because of him. He doesn't know. He can't know, but you know, and you're the one who has to live with it. Tony put a hand on her shoulder. That thing you just did in there? That was magic. Pure magic. People don't get talent like that every day. Seems like a shame to waste it. Before Maya could respond, the back door burst open and Carlos stuck his head out. Tony, you need to come see this now. Maya followed Tony and Carlos back inside, her stomach churning with anxiety. Whatever was happening, she had a feeling it wasn't good. Not for her, anyway. The kitchen staff had crowded around Danny, the young server who usually worked the bar area. He was holding his phone up, refreshing something over and over, his eyes wide with excitement. Show them, Carlos urged. Danny turned the phone toward Tony and Maya. On the screen was a video, shaky and filmed from a phone, but the audio was crystal clear. It was Maya sitting at the piano playing Rachmaninoff. The video had been posted 20 minutes ago on a social media platform. Okay, Tony said slowly. Someone posted a video of Maya playing, so what? Look at the numbers, Danny said, refreshing again. When I first saw it 5 minutes ago, it had 2,000 views. Now it's at 15,000. And climbing. Maya's blood ran cold. Who posted it? Some guy named Richard Chen. Says he's a marketing executive. He captioned it, "No one expected the waitress to sit at the piano until she played like a prodigy." It's already being shared like crazy. Maya grabbed the phone from Danny's hand, staring at the screen in horror. The view count clicked up as she watched. 16,000. 17,000. The comments were rolling in too fast to read, but she caught glimpses. This is incredible. Who is she? Why isn't she famous? That technique is insane. This is good, right? Carlos said, looking confused by Maya's expression. I mean, people love it. No, Maya whispered. This is not good. She shoved the phone back at Danny and headed for the dining room. She needed to find Richard. Needed to ask him to take it down, needed to stop this before it got any worse. But when she pushed through the kitchen door, she found the restaurant had transformed into something resembling a concert venue. The corporate party had completely abandoned their private room. They were all gathered around the piano area, drinks in hand, talking excitedly. Other diners had moved their chairs for a better view. And they were all looking at her expectantly when she appeared. There she is, someone called out. Will you play something else? A woman asked. Can I get a picture with you? Another voice chimed in. Maya felt trapped. She spotted Richard near the front and pushed through the small crowd toward him. Excuse me, Mr. Chen? I need to talk to you about that video. Richard's face lit up. Isn't it amazing? The response has been overwhelming. I work in marketing and I know viral content when I see it. This is going to blow up. That's what I'm worried about. I need you to take it down, please. His smile faltered. Take it down? But why? This is incredible publicity. Do you have any idea how many musicians would kill for this kind of exposure? I didn't ask for exposure. I don't want exposure. Maya tried to keep her voice steady. That was a private moment. You had no right to post it without asking me. It was in a public restaurant, Richard said, his tone becoming defensive. There's no expectation of privacy. And honestly, talent like yours deserves to be seen. You're wasting it working as a waitress. The words hit Maya like a slap. She opened her mouth to respond, but Mrs. Patterson appeared at her elbow. The young lady asked you politely to remove the video, the elderly woman said, her voice carrying surprising authority. The decent thing to do would be to respect her wishes. Richard looked between them, clearly uncomfortable now. Look, even if I delete my post, other people recorded it too. It's already out there. He was right. Maya could see other phones pointed at her right now. The damage was done. Tony rescued her, stepping between Maya and the crowd. Folks, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but Maya needs to get back to work. We still have a restaurant to run here. There were disappointed murmurs, but people started to disperse back to their tables. Richard looked like he wanted to say something else but thought better of it and returned to his party. Go home, Tony said quietly to Maya. Your shift's basically over anyway. I'll handle things here. Maya didn't argue. She grabbed her purse from the back office, changed out of her work shoes and left through the front door for once instead of the back alley. She needed to walk, to clear her head, to figure out what to do next. The November air was cold against her face as she made her way down the street toward her apartment. Her mind was spinning with everything that had just happened. By the time she reached her small studio apartment, she'd convinced herself it would be fine, so a video went viral. Those things happened every day. People had short attention spans. By tomorrow, everyone would be watching something else. She'd be forgotten. She was wrong. Maya woke up the next morning to 47 missed calls and over 200 text messages. Her phone had been on silent and now it buzzed continuously with notifications. Her hands shook as she scrolled through them. Most were from numbers she didn't recognize. Is this the pianist from the video? Can we schedule an interview? I represent a concert hall and would love to discuss booking you. There were messages from old classmates at the conservatory, people she hadn't spoken to in years. Maya, is that really you? I knew you'd make it eventually. There were emails too, many emails, from news outlets, talent agencies, music schools. One was from the Manhattan Conservatory, expressing how delighted they were to see one of their former students had maintained her extraordinary talent. Former student. The words stung. She wasn't a student. She was a dropout. A failure. Maya opened her social media apps, something she rarely did. The video had exploded overnight. 2 million views. The numbers were incomprehensible. It had been picked up by music pages, news accounts, feel-good story sites. People were creating reaction videos, analyzing her technique. Someone had found her profile. Her follower count had jumped from 200 to 50,000 overnight. Her messages were full of strangers telling her she was inspiring, that she'd made them cry. It was everything she'd been afraid of, everything she'd been avoiding. The spotlight she'd walked away from 9 years ago had found her anyway, brighter and more intense than ever. Her phone rang. This time it was a number she recognized. Her mother. Maya, her mom said in Mandarin, her voice tight with emotion. I saw the video. Someone from church sent it to me. Everyone's talking about it. Mom, I can explain. Why didn't you tell me you were still playing? I'm not. It was just one time. A mistake. Her mother was quiet for a moment. It didn't look like a mistake. It looked like you were finally being yourself again. Her voice softened. Your father would be so proud. The words broke something inside Maya. She sat down on her bed, phone pressed to her ear, and started crying. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd shed in the alley with Tony, but deep racking sobs that came from somewhere she'd kept locked away for 9 years. He doesn't even know who I am anymore, Maya choked out. What's the point? The point is you're still here. You're still alive. And you still have that gift. Her mother paused. I know you gave up school for us. I know you sacrificed your dreams. But Maya, that was never what your father wanted. He wanted you to be happy, to use your talent. It's too late now. Why? Because you're 28 instead of 19? Because you took a different path? Her mother's voice grew firm. You're not dead, Maya. Your dreams aren't dead. They're just waiting. After they hung up, Maya sat in silence. Her phone kept buzzing with messages. Outside her window, the city moved on. She thought about her father, about the man he'd been before the disease. He'd always told her that music was meant to be shared, not hidden away. She thought about Mrs. Patterson, tears streaming down her face. About how it felt to finally, after 9 years, let herself be the person she was supposed to be. Maya picked up her phone and started going through the messages systematically. Most she deleted, some she saved. One caught her attention. It was from the director of a music therapy program at a hospital, asking if she'd be interested in learning more about their work. Maybe she thought there was a middle path. Maybe she didn't have to choose between hiding completely and becoming a concert pianist. Maybe there was something in between. She replied to 3 emails before her shift at the restaurant started. Then she got dressed, took a deep breath, and prepared herself for whatever was waiting. Walking into Giovanni's that evening felt different. Maya had expected crowds, reporters maybe. Instead, the restaurant looked normal, Tuesday night normal. A handful of tables, soft music playing, Tony checking inventory behind the bar. He looked up when she walked in. You came. You thought I wouldn't? Honestly? Yeah. He set down his clipboard. Half the internet wants to make you famous and you showed up for a Tuesday dinner shift. That takes guts. Maya tied her apron on, the familiar weight of it somehow comforting. I need the money. And I made a commitment. About that. Tony leaned against the bar. The owner wants to talk to you about playing here regularly, as a pianist, not a server. What did you tell him? That I'd ask you first. Tony studied her face. What do you want to do, Maya? Really? She'd been asking herself that question all day. Through the hundreds of messages, the interview requests, the opportunities that seemed too good to be true. What did she actually want? I don't know yet, she admitted. But I know I'm not ready to give up this job. Not yet. Tony nodded. Then you've still got a spot here. Table 6 just sat down. They're yours. The shift passed quietly. Maya took orders, delivered food, cleared plates. A few customers recognized her, asked for photos. She smiled politely and moved on to the next table. The piano sat silent in its corner. Around 8 o'clock, Mrs. Patterson came in. She wasn't on her regular Friday schedule, and Maya felt surprised to see her. I hope you don't mind, the elderly woman said as Maya seated her. I wanted to check on you, make sure you were all right after everything. I'm managing, Maya said. Thank you for standing up for me last night with that man who posted the video. Oh, sweetheart, you don't need to thank me. I just said what needed saying. Mrs. Patterson squeezed Maya's hand. But I do want to tell you something. I taught piano for 45 years. I had hundreds of students. Maybe a dozen had real talent. The kind that makes you sit up and pay attention. She paused. Only one was truly extraordinary. A gift that comes once in a generation. Maya felt her throat tighten. Mrs. Patterson. Let me finish. That student? She gave up music to marry a man her parents chose, moved to another state, had children, lived a perfectly nice life. I saw her again 20 years later at a reunion. She told me she was happy, that she had no regrets. Mrs. Patterson's eyes were sad. But when she thought no one was watching, I saw her staring at the piano in the hotel lobby. The look on her face. It was like staring at a lost love. What are you saying? I'm saying there's no right answer, dear. You can walk away from music again and maybe you'll be fine. Maybe you'll build a good life doing other things. But that longing doesn't go away. I've seen it too many times. The older woman smiled gently. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you truly want, not what you think you should want. After Mrs. Patterson left, Maya couldn't stop thinking about her words. That image of a woman staring at a piano, haunted by what might have been. Was that her future? Would she spend the next 40 years serving tables, visiting her father, living a small, safe life while some part of her soul slowly died? Her shift ended at 10. Instead of going home, Maya found herself walking toward the memory care facility where her father lived. It was late, but the night staff knew her. They buzzed her in without question. Her father's room was on the second floor. Through the window, she could see him sitting in his chair staring at nothing. He did that a lot now. Maya pushed the door open quietly. Hi, Dad. He didn't turn toward her voice, didn't show any sign he'd heard. Some days were better than others. Tonight was not a better day. She sat beside him, taking his hand. His skin was thin, papery. He was only 57, but looked 20 years older. I played piano again, she said softly, not expecting a response. She never did anymore. First time in 9 years. And I was good, Dad, really good. Like I never stopped, nothing. Just that blank stare into the distance. Everyone wants me to play more. To go back to that life? Mom thinks you'd want that too. Maya felt tears building. But I gave it up for you. For her. To help take care of you. And if I go back now, what was it all for? What was the point of these 9 years? The room was quiet except for the heating system. Down the hall, a television played. I'm scared, Maya whispered. I'm scared to try again and fail. I'm scared to want something that much again. Because what if I lose it? What if I'm not as good as I used to be? What if... Her father's hand moved. Just a small squeeze, but Maya felt it. She looked up. His eyes had shifted toward her. And for one brief moment she saw recognition. Saw her father looking back at her. Maya. His voice was rough, uncertain, like someone speaking a language they'd almost forgotten. "My Maya." The tears came then, hot and fast. "I'm here, Dad, I'm right here." "Music," he said, struggling with the word. Music, I know. I stopped playing for so long." His hand squeezed hers again, stronger this time. "No, play, you play." Then the moment passed. The light in his eyes dimmed. He went back to staring at nothing, but Maya held on, knowing she'd just received the answer she'd been looking for. Her father, in his one moment of clarity, hadn't asked about her job or her sacrifices or the years she'd spent taking care of him. He'd asked about her music. He'd told her to play. The next morning, Maya called the music therapy program director. They talked for an hour. The program used music to reach patients with dementia and Alzheimer's. They needed pianists who understood the power of music. It wasn't Carnegie Hall, but as the director described, watching patients who hadn't spoken in months suddenly sing along. Maya felt something shift inside her. This was the middle path she'd been looking for. She also called Tony, told him she'd play at Giovanni's twice a week. She'd split her time between serving and playing, and she started practicing again, not 8 hours a day, but 2 hours every morning. Her fingers remembered everything. 3 weeks later, Maya walked into her father's memory care facility, carrying a portable keyboard. She'd asked permission from the staff to set it up in the common room. Several residents were there, some in wheelchairs, some sitting on couches, most staring blankly at nothing. Maya sat down and started to play. Simple songs first. "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." What a wonderful world. Songs from the 40s and 50s that these patients might remember from their youth. Something incredible happened. One woman, who the nurses said never spoke, began humming along. A man in a wheelchair started tapping his foot. Another woman's face lit up with the first smile anyone had seen in weeks. Maya played for an hour. Not showing off, not trying to impress anyone. Just sharing music with people who needed it. When she finished, several family members who'd been visiting thanked her with tears in their eyes. One man said it was the first time he'd seen his mother smile since her diagnosis. Her father had been sitting in the back of the room. He didn't sing along or tap his foot, but Maya could swear just for a moment she saw him smile. Over the following months, Maya built a new life. She played at Giovanni's twice a week, and the piano nights became so popular, Tony had to start taking reservations. She worked with the music therapy program 3 days a week, traveling to different facilities, and she kept her serving shifts because the routine grounded her and the tips helped pay bills. She wasn't famous. She wasn't a concert pianist. She wasn't what 19-year-old Maya had dreamed of becoming. She was something better. Something real. The viral video still existed online, still got views and comments. Sometimes people recognized her. But Maya had learned to see it differently now. Not as an invasion of privacy or a loss of control, but as an unexpected gift. A reminder that she'd been hiding something beautiful, and beauty deserved to be seen. One Friday evening at Giovanni's, 6 months after that first night, Maya sat at the piano preparing for her set. Mrs. Patterson was at her usual table. The restaurant was full, the atmosphere warm and alive. Maya placed her hands on the keys and smiled. Then she began to play.